Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? Thank you for joining me here on this live stream, this show version live stream where I try to go live regularly. I want to thank you guys for being here on a Saturday morning, going live at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And today we're going to talk about CML-P, Cisco Modeling Labs Personal, the Personal Edition. But before we get to that, I want to ask you guys, how are you doing? Where are you coming from today? What have you been working on this week? And I hope you guys have a good cup of coffee as we try to go through CML-P, understand how it works, what can we do with it, many different things. So let's try to get ready here as we try to dive in. So in this week has been such a crazy week for me. I need a sip of this. I celebrated my wife and my son's birthdays, so I managed to take those 2 days off, and I've just been completely unmotivated to do anything with technology. I didn't read into any technology at all, just only what I had to for work. And it was just a tough week to try to stay focused on anything that is of what I do on a regular basis. And Terrell Boyer, thank you for joining me here from Lake Dallas, Texas. Wonderful. How's it going over there in Dallas, Lake Dallas? I hope that's close to Dallas. But it's this week I've been just clouded with, I guess it's exhaustion is what it is from doing work, right? I have a full-time job. I co-host a podcast, and I try to do these live streams or videos regularly, and I just overworked myself without rewarding myself with anything in return. So one of the things that I think is important as we continue to just do all this work, even working from home, because you tend to blend work and personal life together as you work from home, is to regularly take some breaks. And I actually trying to decide whether or not to bring a fan into this garage because it's been hot and I'm starting to feel it now with the lights on. But I did not take as many breaks as I should, although this week I took a break from technology. And usually my breaks contain playing video games, and I usually play something like Call of Duty or any first-person shooting game just to relieve that stress. And I think it's important to relieve that stress, get your mind away from thinking about the regular things you're thinking about, change it up a bit, and possibly go on some bike rides. So I did go outdoors on a bike ride with my son a couple days this week. We're probably going to go on another bike ride right after this live stream because he's got a new bike for his birthday. And it's just refreshing to be outdoors, get that blood flowing and being able to come back a little refreshed. So this week, I'm a lot more refreshed. And Brian Slayman, thank you for joining me here. Yeah, you agree as well. And it's something that you got to do regularly just so you don't burn out and then you come back with your best. All right. What do you guys do to relieve the stress? What are you doing so you're not getting burned out in IT? Because that, I think, is a common thing, as even I know in the Bay Area, a lot of these companies will really overwork a lot of their employees because they tend to be working all day, all night. They work all the time, especially in companies that have a cloud presence where service needs to be up 24/7. So they tend to be working all the time at all hours of the day. And I know a few people who do that. And I think it's just a little dangerous to be working that much. And you just need to have some fun every once in a while, whatever that may be. Maybe it is reading a book. Maybe it is sitting alone in the dark, sipping a good glass of bourbon. I don't know. Francois, thanks for joining. He says he plays tennis. So usually a sport will really get the blood flowing and get your mind off of things as you focus on a sport. Just get yourself thinking differently, get some activity in. I think that's something really good. And Brian says he tries to get in some surfing. That actually sounds really fun. I think I should try to pick up some surfing, although the beach is a little far away. Anders says Call of Duty cycle. That still refers to Wi-Fi technology. Better with bike rides, taking one in an hour. Yeah, and the other day I rode about 7 miles with my son, so I thought that was great. All right. So you guys are probably interested in Cisco Modeling Labs, the personal edition. What is something that you would want to know about Cisco Modeling Labs and what it's for? When it was early on announced, I did take part in the what do you call it? Like the beta program where we just kind of test it out, let them know what we think and find any bugs. I thought it was pretty good. And then later on, they went through the name change. It used to be called VIRL, which I thought that was a pretty cool sounding name, right? Viral, working on viral, but I guess maybe it has some negative connotations to it. But they renamed it, rebranded it to CML, Cisco Modeling Labs. There are two different versions. There's a personal version and also an enterprise version. And so those two versions have, the biggest thing is that CML-P will limit you to about 20 nodes. So if that's going to be a hard limitation for you, you're going to want to upgrade to enterprise, although I do not know what the cost is for enterprise. There are a lot more features that are catered to enterprise networks. CML-P, I think, is great for getting started with your certification studies. If you're going for CCNA or CCNP, CCIE, maybe not, because you might need more than 20 nodes. But it allows you to get access to images that you would run virtually and then be able to run labs and access these images like iOS to perform certain labs, like configurations that you want to work on. The biggest update, also a bigger update to CML, is that it's got API capabilities. So you're able to now really dive into DevOps and start using DevOps with CML. So you can access CML through API. You can build labs through the API, be able to spin those up faster, and then be able to practice some of those DevOps labs as well through CML-P. And so what I've done, and I held off on doing this video because I had put together a new server, a server that has an Intel Xeon processor. It's starting out with 32 gigs of RAM, but I could expand that. I got 4 slots, so I could upgrade the RAM as much as possible. And I have this in a lab. So this is not in on-premises here in my home lab. I have this in a separate lab in which I set up a VPN connection to. So I have a partial VPN. It's not a full VPN tunnel. I'm only sending the traffic that I need to. So that way, hopefully this video stream stays up and running pretty well. But I created a new VMware ESXi lab. It's running 6.7. And then in that lab, I only have that server, and then I have a MikroTik router, and that's how I VPN to it. I just do a remote access VPN. I could maybe in the future make this accessible out into the web. I can do some port forwarding. We'll see how we can play around with it. With CML, I could probably spin up a lab and then have one router available out to the internet where we could try to make some API queries, do some GET and POST requests. So I think in the future, there's a lot of different possibilities here. But let's take a look at what I've got here. So I've already installed CML. It's when I purchased it, it's $199 for the personal edition. So there's quite a price tag to this, but it beats buying out several pieces of equipment to put a lab together. So I think that's one advantage there. And then as I try to fix this, I got a black picture in picture there. So why is that actually happening? Here we go. Hello. And so I'll try to zoom in on this. Try to do some live video editing on here. So I've got CML-P, and that's what I'm using. I don't know how much the enterprise is. I think you got to license it separately somehow. Probably got to contact your account manager for that. But Cisco, it's a yearly subscription, as you can see, $199, and I have an access for 365 days. It is licensed, so you get a token afterwards in which you have to install on your lab. So Cisco Modeling Labs, before we get into it, I have it installed. They gave me an OVA file that I could download, and I just import the OVA, go through some couple of prompts to set it up, where you create your user accounts, and that's about it. So we've got here a little bit of a description of Cisco Modeling Labs. And so they're really pushing this network DevOps journey, which is possible through Cisco Modeling Labs. And the way they pitch this is you can reduce your lab costs and increase productivity for your network management team. That's such a managerial language there. So you're going to simulate a lot of these different platforms, which includes iOS V, NXOS V, iOS XE, even the ASA. And here's the differences with enterprise, right? So enterprise, you're saying you can create models and what if scenarios. I mean, you can do that with personal, but you're just limited to the scope, the size of what that would look like. You can use Cisco iOS network operating system with routers and switches. I'm not sure how possible that is, because I'll show you that I think you can do the same thing in personal. You can connect virtual and physical environments. So again, it's kind of vague, but I think you can do some of this with the personal edition as well, and also run some third-party images. It includes an API to make a key part. Okay, sure. So it's supposed to be easier to use. Here are the specs for CML, right? You need at least one network interface in order for CML to be reached or can go out to your network or internet. How much memory it's allowed, and the hard disk space. So I have a minimum of 8 gigs right now of memory. I'm using the OVA, so I think they've already set this for me as I imported. And so I'm using VMware ESXi, its own dedicated server for this. And that's about it, right? So there's some data sheets here that you could look at. But what's also interesting to me is how we can look at the CML API. So this is new for 2.0 or CML-P, the next iteration of VIRL. And so here are all these different API calls we can make. So you can see you can make calls to labs, do all sorts of things here, which is going to be interesting as I dive into this a little bit further to see what is possible and what we can do to further learn how to use API in the network, especially for someone like me or you. If you're like me, my personal experience has only been with CLI and a couple of GUIs, and GUIs I haven't been pretty happy with, but API I can get behind if it makes things a lot more efficient, right? So here we've got web services for interfaces of different nodes in a lab, which I think is going to be great if you want to start creating those scripts, links. So what's really neat here is what I've seen digging around through some of the documentation is that when you're building a lab, you could actually configure a lab through a script, right? You can create a whole new lab just by pushing out a script to CML-P. And I think that would actually speed up a lot of what's happening if you want to build out specific labs for things. So what I could do in the future is probably create some labs, allow you guys to import it into your own CML-P instance and be able to get up and going. And so here we can make modifications to configurations, runtime, and also the system as well. So lots of different API capabilities here. Oh man, look at this licensing. All right. Different schemas, but API is the future, right? So I'll close that because I'm not going to dive too deep into APIs. I'm still learning APIs myself and Python. But here we go, another full page on Cisco Modeling Labs. They even have a sandbox. So if you want to try it out, you could access CML Sandbox for free. You can try it out. You just got to reserve it, and then you have access to see what CML is like if you want to give this a try. And so here we go with modeling your network and using Net DevOps. So this is what I'm really interested in doing. This is my end goal right here, getting to this, using PyATS, Ansible to automate a lot of different components of your network. And let's see how capable, what's capable, right? So here we can download, here's the enterprise and personal version. So let's see, what happens if we get enterprise? I'm just curious how much it costs. Which you will have to contact your rep, I guess. All right, so I'll close that. CML comes with a guide, the documentation. The documentation is pretty good, I think. I suggest going through that before you use CML-P. They've got a quick start guide if you don't, if you're impatient with reading all of this and just want to get started right away. There's an easy quick start guide there. We could also look at the release notes. They do say try to read this as much as possible because release notes show you what's changed from the previous version. And they don't go into why they've renamed it CML because, you know, VIRL was a pretty cool name. But here's the summary of the changes. The web application itself is different. So now they're using HTML5, a new simulation engine to really get all of this running. So what's also neat is this external connector, which I will show you in a lab that we create. Here's some of the new features, right? It goes a little bit deeper into that. They've again changed the simulation engine. I think it runs really smooth, and the resources, as long as you've given this VM some RAM, it works pretty well. And so some of the new features, again, APIs and programmability, which it's not moving. It's just kind of sitting there. So I'll scroll manually. And so here's the client libraries that you can look at. And then licensing. All right. Read the guide if you have to. There's more documents. There's a book. There's this thing called Workbench, which I haven't figured out how to do not Workbench, Breakout Tool. Breakout Tool allows you to use your application to like iTerm to get into your lab environment, your different routers and switches, but I haven't been able to get that work yet, although I just started looking at it last night. So any questions yet about CML-P before I log in? I haven't really dived into CML-P heavily. I just installed this. Then I had some connectivity issues to my lab where my lab is located to get to here. So I tried to recreate let me tell you my experience with licensing. I installed CML-P on this server, brand new. It's in a different location. And then I lost connectivity to it. So I lost connectivity last night. And so I tried to recreate this VM on my Intel NUC, which I have here in my home. And I installed it. And then when I got to the licensing part, I was unable to license it. And when you don't license your CML-P, you can't start the images. And in order to register a new instance, you have to deregister the first one. And I couldn't do that since I couldn't get access to my lab. And so the manual says to contact support. And I'm like, all right, support on a Friday afternoon. I try to do that and reach the chat. And the first thing they say is submit an email with a screenshot of what's happening and they'll get to it. And I said, forget it. But then I managed to get connectivity back to my lab. And so here we are. We're about to get started. So I almost bailed on this thing. So logging in for the first time, you just go to the IP address of the box of CML, and you type in your password. See if I get my password right. So here we are. This is your lab manager. So currently I don't have any labs, but you can see here that I've got utilization going on. No VMs running currently. And when you first log in after you've installed CML-P, you will be presented with a nice red box here where it says there's something wrong and you need to address it. And that is because of licensing. You need to license your instance of CML. And you click on a button, it brings you to settings, edit settings. So I'll go there right now here at the tools section and go to licensing. Here it'll have some alerts, and you've got to insert your token. And so when you put in your token, it's going to use smart licensing. So this instance does need to go and reach out to the internet and contact Cisco's servers in order to determine whether or not you're licensed to use this. And so you got to have access to your smart software manager. And so I wasn't unable to log into Smart Software Manager. I have no idea which account it got tied to because I purchased this through Cisco's Learning Network website. But here on the right side, you do have ability to deregister this instance, so you can go build another instance somewhere else in a different lab and register that instance. And so everything's all good here. I'm all authorized to use this, and you can see the personal edition allows you up to 20 nodes capacity. Now that I believe could be increased just if they update the software. There's been a few people who have argued about having more than 20 nodes because it is not enough. And I would agree with them. If you're trying to build out some pretty big labs, especially for CCIE, you're going to want to use more than 20 nodes. And so that's the licensing portion. So you're stuck with licensing when you're dealing with this. So here I'll go to tools so we can see what's part of CML-P. We've got these different nodes and images that come with CML-P. And so with these images, they provide you with Linux images as well as some of the network devices. You've got Alpine Linux and network tools, T-Rex, which I haven't used before. We've got a WAN emulator. You got a virtual instance of ASA running 9.12.2, Core OS. Here we've got CSR 1000V, another desktop, iOS V version 15. Then we got a layer 2 switch here, iOS XR, another iOS XR, a 9000, a 9K, NXOS version 7.3, and my Alexa is going off for some reason.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, I said NXOS and Alexa came on. And then we've got some tiny core links and also an Ubuntu instance. So we can create a pretty decent lab with these images. So you can manage the current images here. You can browse, but you can define a new image as well. Here, so you can upload some images as long as it's got the right file format, and you just got to define it. I haven't played around with uploading any new images, so we'll just kind of skip that for now. So I'll go back here to the main page, kind of see what else there is available. So here's sample labs where you can download a lab and import it into CML. There's different kinds, so you can load it, and you can see how many nodes there are. I tried to, let's see, which one did I upload initially? I think I just uploaded this 25 node example topology just to test out this 20 node limit, and it would not start. So we'll go back over here, the tools. You got diagnostics if you need to look at the system and what kind of settings there are here for this. So there's not much to see there. And then we've got systems administration. There's a different page that you can go to manage the CML instance itself. If you have different users accessing CML-P, you can create a user account here, and they could use their own user account. When they create their own labs, you do not have access to see that. They only see their own labs. All right. We've got a client library, which has really good API client documentation about what you could do. So here, they still call it VIRL 2, I guess, internally. Here is where the examples are going to be really useful when you're creating your lab, because you can create a lab with just API functions. So here is a simple script that if you run against CML, will create a 2-node lab. And this is it, guys. So you can create a lab using scripts, stop them all, create a name, and be able to be up and running pretty quickly. All right, so that I think is really neat. Some other thing is this breakout tool. So the breakout tool allows you, again, to use your own console access. So your iTerm or your PuTTY, whatever you use. And I haven't figured out how to use this yet, right? So there's an installer for Windows, but the breakout utility for Mac OS is this, but it's not of an install file, and I tried to rename it, so I'm not sure what's going on. And so I wanted to get this going so I didn't have to use the console that's built into the web interface, and I'll show you that. And then we've got some more API documentation and support. All right, so why don't we get to creating a lab? To create a lab, it's right up here at the top right. It says add lab with a plus icon, so I'll press that. And here you can rename it. So we'll call it test lab, right? So there's the name. It's got 0 nodes in there, and you could start it, stop it, wipe the lab, or delete it. If we click on it, we'll be brought into the workbench for that lab. So here we could initialize a topology now. And with this, you have different nodes on the right side. This is our main topology builder here in the middle. And then you've got these different buttons here to undo something that you've done. So if I've dragged this here, let's see, if I hit undo, it just removes it, my last action, undoes my last action. You could center the topology. So if I brought that, if it's everything's over here to, off center, you can just click this and I guess it centers it, which it didn't do. There you go. Just brings it into view. Very nice. You can undo that. You could zoom in on your topology, zoom out, or bring it full screen. On the bottom panel, we've got lab information, which will tell us how many nodes, how many links and interfaces. We can give a description. We've got simulate, which is start the lab, because by default, it's not started yet. But as we add more nodes here, we'll start that. It gives you a list of all the nodes, your design. You could build it with an initial bootstrap configuration, some logs, and some lab notes. So if we bring in, which image should we drag into here? Let's do some basic router. Where's XR? Let's just use this iOS. So I brought that one in there. I'm going to zoom in a bit because that's pretty small. Maybe I'll zoom in on this screen here for you guys. Oh, that resolution is not that pretty. So you can see as I hover over an instance, I can start it, or I can create a link to another network device. Also, if you click on it, then I've gone into the node info for this node. So you can see all the different tabs specifically for this node. So here's the console if we were to start it. And let me get rid of my picture-in-picture here. So I'll add another IOSV router here. So now I've got 2 network devices. What I can do is I can click and drag this link and drag it over to the other network device, and we'll create a link between these 2. And when I let go, it says it's asking me which interfaces I want to use. I can be very specific on each router, or I can just say use the next available, which will be gig Ethernet 0/0. So there we go. We've got that going. Our lab still isn't active. So here now at the bottom, we have 2 nodes with 1 link going on here, but there are a total of 10 interfaces. So now if I head over to simulate, you can see I can start it. And now there's these little icon here, shows it's loading, and that'll start up. If I go to nodes, you can see that it's getting started, how much resources is being used by starting this. And you'll see that at first it ramps up, but then it'll ratchet down. So we've got 2 nodes currently. Here's the logs, kind of shows you what's every step that's been happening. So how I've added different network nodes, and then we could have some lab notes if we wanted to. So those are still starting up. Now you see that if the device has started up, I have this console icon here. If I click on that, it brings me to this console where I have to click on open console. And I want to expand it. I don't like having that gray area. So it says press enter to activate this terminal. So when you do this, you can see it actually start up if it's still starting up. It's still starting up. And also here on the top right, we have notifications. And here just tells you what's going on. It's kind of the same as like what you see in the log. So as this starts up, hopefully 8 gigs of RAM is enough to get this thing started. Still going. So now we've got a green box here. Now we got them on both. So you can see I'm in a console. It's as if I started up this Cisco router from scratch, and it's asking me, do I want to enter initial configuration dialog? And I will say no. And I'll do the same on this guy. Click on no. So far, do you guys think this would be useful for you if you were going to start labbing or working on, say, a Cisco certification like CCNA or CCNP? Let me know in the comments. If you guys do like this CML-P instance, hit a like button. Let me know what you think. But here we go. We got this router starting up. All the interfaces coming up. It's like looking at a real router here, right? So there's this little banner that says IOSV strictly limited just for evaluation purposes. Lots of details here. Now we're able to go into this router. And if I do show IP interface brief, you can see the interfaces are all shut down. And what I want to do is connect these 2 together. And so what we could do is start editing the configuration for an interface. Type in interface, gig Ethernet 0/0, head into there. Let's just try to configure an IP address on here. I'll give it an IP address of 10.10.10.10/24. No shut. All right. There you go. Got a status message. Interface is up. Let's head over to our other router. We could rename this too, just to, let's call it R1. All right. Got a basic lab going here. I head over to the other router and do about the same thing. I'm going to give it its own IP address. First, we'll change the host name, call it R2. Then I will go into interface gigabit Ethernet 00. We'll give it an IP address of 10.10.10.11. I don't know why I'm picking such hard IP addresses. Will this work? Do we have connectivity to each one? There you go. Got a simple ping. So now we can start playing with things like routing, right? So for the sake of this show version, live stream. Let's do a show version. What are we dealing with here? All right, so Cisco iOS, here's the version 15.8. We're using Advanced Enterprise. So you don't have to deal with licensing here. The images are already uploaded for your purpose of studying or labbing, learning how to use Cisco routers and switches. Further on in the show version, you could see the interfaces, how much RAM it has. We can do a show run to see the configuration. Here's the configuration of this router. So I've got an interface up. What is the best, Juicy has a question. What is the best setup of PC for CML? So you're going to want a server or a computer that's got a lot of resources. So CPU resources and RAM. And because what you're doing is simulating a lot of these network devices, you're going to want a powerful computer in order to do this. So that way you still can, if you're using that computer as well as running the labs, you want to be able to use that computer, but not be exhausted of resources on that computer. So in this instance, I'm actually running it on my own server. It's an Intel Xeon processor. It's got a lot of CPUs on there, and it also has 32 gigs of RAM currently. I could upgrade that RAM if I need to, because I do have other VMs on this server because it's running on ESXi. But you do want to have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, so that way you could get started with a simple lab. And then CPU, you want to have, I think it wants at least 4 virtual CPUs. So it can get pretty resource intensive, especially as you build out larger labs up to 20 nodes. All right. So what we've done here is we've created 2 routers together. We can ping each one, and I was able to get that up and running easily with 2 connectors. While this is running, I think if you were using something like GNS3 back in the day, you had to shut all the labs down as you add in another device. We can easily just drag and drop another one here and start it up. It's not linked to anything, so I could just create a link there, use the next available, and create another link here to that guy, use the next available. And then we could go back to, I don't want to look at nodes. I want to try to move this. There you go. We have 3 nodes now with 3 links total. 1, 2, 3. So you can see as I click on a link, you can easily see the routers that are connected along with which interface name. And Anders is asking, have you tried GNS3? And if so, how do they compare? I used GNS3 a long time ago. The downside to GNS3 is you have to find the images yourself. So you can either get those images from your workplace and be able to try to run them within GNS3, although I'm not sure if legally you're allowed to do that. A lot of people also illegally obtained images. And then I also had issues where sometimes I was more focused on trying to get GNS3 to work. Now, GNS3, it's a lot more advanced now. There's also EVE-NG. So those 2 are more of the open source tools that compare to CML-P. But for me, time is something that is precious to me. So I don't want to spend a lot of time just trying to get it to work, trying to get the platform to work. CML-P, I see that the images are already there. I should just be able to drag and drop and start the image and be able to get up and running. As you can see, I was already able to configure some routers. And Francois asked, can you get a Catalyst 9800 controller and some APs? I'm pretty sure you should be able to do that. You just have to have the right image to upload, which that was one of the first things I thought of. And I wish they were able to add that image here as something to play around with, because then now you could test out, for example, having a controller that sits out here on one subnet and maybe some APs on different subnets, and then you could see what the routing would look like, the roaming, layer 3 roaming, something like that. So maybe in the future I'll play around with trying to add a couple of try to add Catalyst 9800s, because then you could also then simulate some redundancy, for example. And Mech, you say EVE-NG was way less troubleshooting. I agree. I installed EVE-NG a couple of weeks ago. I think I had one issue, but I was able to get through it and was able to get up and running with EVE-NG. Again, you still need to find images, and I don't like finding images, spending time finding images to get it working. Here, I already have access to different Cisco OSs. EVE-NG, you could use Juniper images. I would imagine you could probably use Juniper images here as well, as long as you've got the right file. But for now, we'll stick to what Cisco's got. So I've got this router here. You could then, it's been a while since I've even played with routing. How do you even enable ERGRP nowadays? Whoa, what is that? I hit question mark. All right, this tiny window is really bothering me. So this is why I wanted to set up that, what is it called? That boot. Oop. We'll just use one. And then, so remember, so I'm going to try to create some routing here, because we've got this link. These two are already up, right? It's a 10.10.10/24. And what I want to do is enable ERGRP with a network statement. It's been a while, guys. So now if we do show IP protocols, so I've enabled ERGRP of an instance of 1. Here it is. It's got here's its router ID, and I'm routing for this network, right? Show ERGRP neighbors. Nope. I forgot all these routing commands. There you go. So I got no neighbors. So what I want to do is then go to the other router. If I can click on it, there you go. We can do the same thing here. Do router ERGRP 1, then do network 10. It just kind of brought it down to 10. Look at that. We got a new adjacency. That's great. We do show IP ERGRP neighbors. So we've got an adjacency there. So then what I could do is go to this router, and we want to name it R3. I wish when you renamed them with hostname that this name down here underneath the router would change. I believe I would have to go here and then call it R3. Go to this node, call it R1. And go to this node, call it R2. Come on, guy. Thought I clicked on it. There you go. All right, so we got 3 routers. We want to configure some routing between them, right? I'll go ahead and configure the host name on this guy of R3. And then the interfaces that I have connected. And I wish I could see the interface names here. I don't know how to do that yet. Let's see on this router specifically, the interfaces. So we've got, so when you rename them, it's neat because now if I click on interfaces for R3, you can see that gigabit Ethernet 0/0 is connected to gigabit Ethernet 0/1 on R1. So we could then configure that interface for a different network. So if I go to that interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/0, IP address 172.16. Make it easy. And we'll do a no shut there. I've got to go back to router 1. If we confirm the interfaces, it's 0/1 connected to R3. Go back to terminal window here. Interface G0/1, IP address 172.16.1.2. Do a no shut. Then we'll confirm reachability. Takes it a while to get up. There you go. We've got pings, right? But if we look at show IP protocols, we're only routing for the 10 network. What I want to do on this guy is ping 172.16.1.1. So if we remember, 172.16.1.1 is an interface on R3. And if we look at the IP routing table, we don't have a network there. I don't know if this works. Okay, see if I'm fast enough. So now we go here to this router 1, and I need to get my typing right. Router EIGRP1, and then say we want to advertise that network. For router 3, we got to do the same thing. Advertise that network. So we got the interface up. I'll go back into router EIGRP1 and advertise that network as well. So I show IP protocols. We got an adjacency up now, as you can see here on the bottom left, that it formed an adjacency. Show IP protocols. We're advertising that network. If we go to R3, all of a sudden we can start pinging it. If I can get it to stop. It's going to keep going. But it wasn't working because up here, we didn't have a route to that 172.16 network. So you could see it started to not work. And then as I brought up the adjacency, now we're understanding how to configure EIGRP routing. And usually Control C stops this, but it's not. What did I do? All right. So this is a pretty cool way to play with routing, with switching. We got switches here. I can show IP route because I don't have any routers in my lab. Routers can be pretty expensive. You can get a hold of secondhand routers, but you don't know what version they're running. For example, you might have to pick up a new version of that, the software for that. But here in this lab environment, I'm able to play with 3 routers. I can connect another one if I want to. One thing that I do want to show, let's see. So we've got this lab, right? 3 nodes, 3 lanes, there's 15 total interfaces. Here's the list of nodes, CPU that's running. So you can see R1 is processing quite a lot. I don't have a link between here. We could probably set up some equal costs load balancing if I set up that link for EIGRP, but I'm not going to do that. We can look at labs and lab notes. So what's really great here, I think, if I can show this to you, I'll go back to my lab manager up here to the right. And so here's my lab. It's still running in the background. As you can see, it's got this green indicator. It started. And you can just click back into it and be able to go up and be up and running again. So that's great. Here, if I go to this hamburger icon here, I can download the lab. All right. So you can see that it'll give it the name of test lab, and it's in the form of a YAML file. So this is where automation is really going to be pretty handy, because I haven't in my previous videos dove into YAML too much. So now I'm going to be forced to use YAML, right? And I want to show you what this YAML file looks like, because now we could really play with network automation. You guys can I can send you my lab and you could upload it yourself and be able to use it for your testing purposes as well. You can share these labs and have somebody confirm something for you. And Juicy asks, it would be good for network automation if you can access the devices directly from your terminal. Yes, you can do that. And let me show you real quick. If you go to this hamburger icon, there is, or no, not that one. Where is it? I got to go back to the lab manager. Under tools, you have the option of this breakout tool. If you click on that, it brings you to this page in which there are different installers. And using these installers, if I show my screen actually. So I went to my lab, the main screen, the lab manager, went to tools and clicked on breakout tool. If you install this breakout tool, you could use command line interfaces to set up what essentially is like console access to your devices in your lab. And if you scroll down, it's got documentation on how this would work. There's these files down here on the bottom right. So there's an exe file for Windows. I will have to boot up my Windows computer and see what the install looks like. And I think David Bombal has a very good video of installing that as well. But here are Linux and Mac OS. I got to figure out how to make that work with Mac OS. So I haven't set that up yet. I just started looking at it yesterday. So here we've got, going back to my test lab, I was able to click on this hamburger icon and download the lab. All right. So I want to show you what downloading the lab looks like. It is a YAML file in which it has the data, the information, the configuration of what I've used on my different nodes. So here's my lab. I don't have a description or any notes, so there's nothing there. The title of the lab that I gave it, what version, and here's the notes. We've got R1, which I gave it that label. This is the coordinates on the actual workbench. Then I have my interfaces that I have configured there. And it does that for each one. The cool thing is it already adds the links as well. So the links is really interesting to get your lab recreated. So what I could do is then send this YAML file to you. You would go to your lab manager and do an import lab, right? So you could import that lab back into your instance and then start it up. So that's really neat. One thing before we end this live stream that I wanted to play with is this external connector. This external connector is really cool. So I'll move this. The external connector allows you to connect your network devices to your network and out to the internet. If I click on external connector here, we can see what kind of interface type for the network connector. You could make it a NAT, where it just NATs out this set of devices out to whatever network is on your VM, or you can just bridge it to your network. So I'll play with the bridge functionality, and I want to bring in something pretty easy here. We'll use an unmanaged switch to connect to multiple devices, and I just want to use a simple switch. So what I'll do is I'll link my unmanaged switch to this external connector, because the external connector only has one port. Because of that, we got to use a switch in order to provide multiple connections. So I'm going to bring in this iOS switch into the managed switch, and we will start these up. So now we got to look at our resources here. If I can click, give me my lab. Let's look at the nodes. So my network, this network is on a 172.31 network. So you can see these are booting up now. iOS switch is booting up. The external connector is all good. It's ready to go. And I don't remember if we'll see. We'll see if I can get this to work. Well, this is how we'll end this live stream. So there's my switch. It's booting up. I lost it. What I want to do is give an IP address to my layer 2 switch, so that way I can actually access it through terminal on the same network, because I provided connectivity for this switch through an external connector, which is bridging this switch to my physical network where my server sits. So you would need to have at least those virtual, on your vSwitch in ESXi, have those networks available to bridge it to. All right, so the switch done loading, it is. We'll do enable, config T, we'll give it a host name of switch 1. We'll do a show IP interface brief real quick. So all the interfaces are up. I believe this is just using interface gigabit Ethernet 00. What I'll do is enable interface VLAN 1, and I will give it an IP address on the same network. I don't know which one is available, to be honest. Let's open up iTerm. Just want to be sure I do not use an IP that's already used. All right, so we'll keep this ping going. So let me see if I could move this window over. All right, got to fix this so you can see full screen. It says current application. Let's look at the whole screen. There you go. That's better, right? So you can see both of those. Got to be able to use this window to configure it. 1.254. All right, so knowing how to configure switches, you got to create a default gateway, right? And I know, dealing with VIRL 2 or CML-P, that the default gateway doesn't work. It's a lab environment. I don't know why they do it this way, but if I do it this way, right, it's not going to work. So first, I wanted to make sure my VLAN 1 interface is up. It's down. I knew it. I need to do a no shutdown or no shut on that. Let's wait for that interface to come up. I have a default gateway set up. Oh, I can ping it. There you go. But I know before I had to do an IP route statement. So that might be something, if it doesn't work for you, you'd have to do like an IP route. Cause it's a layer 2 switch. I know. I just remember I had to do that before. So you can see that on my Mac OS, on this terminal, I'm now able to ping the layer 2 switch that I created back here in CML-P, because I have bridged the connection from this switch to an external connector. That's going to be the key part of accessing your network as you do the automation for all these network devices. And that's how you can tie other systems. Maybe you have a server that's running your Ansible playbooks. That's how you can connect it back into this network, this lab environment on CML-P. So because I can access that, first we want to enable SSH, right? Does anyone remember what that is? Crypto key generate mod. We'll use a low one. Crypto key generate RSA mod 1024. Domain name, IP domain name. All right, now we run that command again. All right, it's quick. And then we go to line VTY015, input SSH or transport SSH. What am I doing? Whoa. If I can type it, guys. Transport input SSH for the line VTY. Then we'll say username, role D, privilege 15. My secret is password. Let's see if it'll allow it. Yes, we'll write that. All right, so remember, I can now ping my layer 2 switch that's in CML-P using that external connector. So you can see I started pinging the IP address 172.31.1.254. And then in in CML-P, I gave it an IP address of that IP address VLAN 1 and its bridge to that external connector. And now I can ping it locally on my Mac OS. So now I should be able to SSH to it because I configured SSH. Hopefully I configured it properly. I set up a user account, privilege 15. So here we go. Look at that. That's the same banner that we saw. Whoops. That we saw loading on the console. I'll put in my super secret password. Denied. You know what I forgot to do? Line VTY 015, login local. Oh, what did I forget, guys? Going too quick. Got my username. I can reach it. I've got SSH going and HTTP. Shouldn't this work? I'm getting a username prompt. Did I type in my username right? Did I type in the password right? There you go. I'm in. I think it was a login local that I forgot. So now I'm in this switch, right? If I do show IP interface brief, I'll show you I'm modifying this switch here, right? We'll do interface VLAN 10. You can see on the console, I've got interface VLAN 10, state down. So now if I do show IP interface brief, you can see that it's down. It's not connected to anything, but I am able to access my network devices in CML-P if I've created that external connector. And just to show you tell you the setup of this is, again, I'm in my home. In the garage, I have a VPN going to this lab, and I'm able to create the lab, create the external connector. As long as I'm on the right network that I'm giving these devices, I'm able to access those devices. So even if I were to create some routing, I should be able to access it as long as the network's set up correctly. So that's kind of my first look at CML-P. What do you guys think about CML-P? Let me know in the comments, in the chat. Looking forward to what you think and if this is a viable product for us to start really learning, as long as we can add more images to this, which I will look into for the future. But going into CML-P, I think it's a great resource for us in order to test out different routers, test out configurations, start studying for your CCNP and hopefully some of this for your CCIE, although we do need that 20 node limit lifted in order to fully study for CCIE. We'll see how you can connect this to other external parts of your lab, maybe some network automation with some of the things I want to look at is Netbox and network automation with Ansible playbooks, looking at Python scripting to make modifications to play with the APIs that's on these devices, and we'll see what we can do in some future videos. So that's all I have for you guys. I want to thank you guys for watching me here, joining me here on a Saturday morning. I hope you guys found this video useful about CML-P. And if you want to learn more, you can go to my website and I'll start writing more about CML-P there. Maybe I'll start uploading some labs as well for you to download. But let me know what you guys think and whether or not it's a great resource. Give me a like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this, and you can get notified as I upload new videos. So thanks again. Thank you guys for visiting me here on the show version live stream. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.